Let me welcome everybody. Let me welcome you to the Future Trends Forum. I'm delighted to see all of you here, and I'm looking forward to hearing from you. My name is Brian Alexander. I'm the forum's creator, host, and cat herder for this next hour, and I'm really looking forward to today's conversation. So to begin, let me introduce the forum. Let me explain how it works, where it came from, and who supports it, and then we'll dive into this week's guest. So let's start off with our first couple of slides. All right, if you could advance one, please. Now, you should know that the Future Trends Forum is a discussion-based outfit, and we are a spin-off of the Future Trends in Technology and Education Report, or FTTE. If you haven't seen that, FTTE is a monthly trends analysis that looks at major trends reshaping higher education and technology. It's been running for years. It covers more than 86 trends. It has all kinds of longitudinal data now, so we can track major trends and project their impact over time. If you haven't had a chance to read it, go to ftte.us. We download a few copies. Next week, the June issue will be out. We'd love to hear your thoughts about it. But again, that's a publication. This forum is discussion-based. Next slide, please. The forum and the FTTE report are both part of my overall project called the Future of Education Observatory. So this is a continuous, ongoing, multimedia participatory open way of trying to get a better handle on where education and technology are headed over the next years. So if you haven't had a chance to take a look at that, just go to futureofeducation.us. And it has links to the forum, it has links to the FTTE report, it also has links to my blog, it has links to an upcoming podcast, it has links to our book club and to our bookstore and to more. So check it out. It's probably right now a unique project. On to the next slide, please. And when you're thinking about this, you're thinking about this future of education, you're thinking about ways of better understanding and imagining where we could be going. It's vital to be thinking about this as an international effort. We have to think about all these projects as potentially crossing borders. The next big thing that could change teaching and learning might not come from your country. It might come from Europe. It might come from North America. It could come from Australia or India or South America. We have to keep our eyes open to the way that education and technology crosses borders all the time. This map shows you a kind of data view of all these different people, where they come from in our forum. You can see we've been covering the globe. So please try and think as internationally as possible over the next hour as we think about where education could be going. Next slide, please. Now, before we go further, I'd like to thank and explain the people who helped sponsor and support the forum. So to begin with, I'd like to thank NYSERNet in New York State. It's a nonprofit that works with New York's colleges and universities to try and get them online to good broadband. We're very grateful to them for their work, and we're especially grateful to them for their support. We're also grateful to Shindig, because you can tell Shindig makes available the technology we're using right now. So if you haven't used it for a while, or if you're new to it, let me just walk you through a few of the key functions. Remember, this forum is not about what I'm doing right this second. I was just talking to you with slides. This is going to stop in a minute. The whole idea here is discussion. So to begin with, where I am right now and where these slides are is the stage. Everybody involved in this conversation can see and hear what goes on the stage. And that includes you. You can join us on stage. In fact, where we are, we can have up to 4 people on stage at a time for a kind of DIY immersion panel. So I'll show you how to do that in just a second. Now below us, you can see a whole bunch, just dozens of different icons. Some of them have video feeds, so you can see, for example, Graham Glenn. Some of them are just silhouettes, like Jeremy Dean. Each of those represents a single login, usually a person, maybe a group of people around a table. If you'd like to learn more about them, or if you want to talk to them, just double-click on them. If they feel like talking to you, your 2 icons will click together like Legos. You can have your own private audiovisual bubble where you can have your own conversation. It may make you do that in a little while too. So that's one way to interact. But the key engine is the very bottom of the screen. We have a white strip running along it. And that strip has a few of the key tools. So let me draw your attention to 4 of them. On the far left edge, you can see what looks like a bunch of dots with a number 43 under it and a little kind of dialog box. If you click that, up will pop 2 different windows. The window on the left is what looks like an old film strip, and it has just a whole list of everybody who's involved in this call right this minute. Everyone from Anissa Vega to Eileen Frank. If you mouse over them, you get to see a little bit more about them, including their title, including that Eileen is a librarian, for example. And that's a way of getting to know where other people are. To the right of that is the chat box, and that's just a classic chat box where everybody here can type, see, and hear. And usually in the forum over the past couple of years, we've seen people use it for a few ways. They use it for informal chatter. Like you can see now, people talking about their work, talking about where they're from, talking about the weather. People also use it for surfacing questions or ideas as they listen to people presenting and talking. And they often use it to share URLs, links to all kinds of resources we come up. So we'll be monitoring that chat box. Please go ahead and use it. It's available for you all the time. Now, back to the white strip. Next to that little kind of complicated icon of numbers and dots is a question mark with a circle around it. If you click that, up will pop a little chat box, and you can type in a question or a comment, which we can then flash to everybody on the screen so everyone can see it. And I'll read out loud so everyone can hear it. That's a good way if you just want to quickly beam a question or a comment at us all. Now, next to that on the white strip is a raised hand button. If you click that, that tells us that you would like to join us on stage. So if your microphone works, if your headset works, if your camera works, and you're in a place where you can talk, fantastic. Just click that button and we'll beam you up on stage. We'll show you how to do it. It's easier to do it than this for me to describe. And that's in many ways the maximum conversation. So we can have up to 4 people talking at one time about this. So those are a whole bunch of tools for you to use to interact and discuss with us. Plus one more. If in another tab or another device you're running Twitter, please tweet at us. Just use the hashtag FTTE or tweet at me, Brian Alexander, and we'll monitor that and bring in your thoughts and questions. So, again, these are all technologies based on discussion and conversation. We're grateful to Shindig for making them available. We're also grateful for one last source of support, which is our supporters on Patreon. If you haven't seen Patreon, Tara, over the next slide, please. Patreon is a crowdfunding site like GoFundMe or Kickstarter, and the idea is to crowdfund and support a creative person making creative stuff. In that case, it's me making stuff about the future of education and technology. People sign up to support for as little as $1 a month, and you can see from this graphic that we have people who contribute more than that. People like Tom Haynes, who's here right now, Chris Locke, Karen Mateer, Michael Haggins, Kyle Johnson, and the unrelated Bob Johnson, and more. These people contribute, and we're really grateful to them for their help. If you haven't seen these yet, just go to patreon.com/Brian Alexander. Check it out. Love to hear your thoughts, and if you can support us, we'd be very grateful. So that's who supports us. That's how the technology works. That's our ideas about having this forum work. Now, let me introduce you to this week's guest. I'm really, really delighted to introduce you to Adam Bush because he is doing some extraordinary stuff. He's the Vice President of Academic Affairs for College UnBound. He's also their founding provost. If you're thinking about new colleges, College UnBound is not even 10 years old yet. So they're doing some extraordinary stuff. They're targeting populations that are not usually served. They're firing off a plethora of innovative pedagogies and curricula. I think they're doing some fascinating stuff, and we could all benefit from learning from them. So, Tara, if you could just dismiss the slide, bring Adam up, if everything works, and let's start picking his brains. And again, friends, as we go, I'll have a stack of questions, but your questions are the real engines that drive this. Adam, how are you doing?
Hey, Brian, it's really nice to be here. Thanks for making time.
Oh, thank you for making the time. I know what the provost schedule could be like. Where are you today?
Right now, I'm actually at Midway Airport in Chicago.
Oh, no. Oh, no.
I know, but Providence College is home to, or Providence, Rhode Island is home to College UnBound. So that's where everything's kind of based, and then it splinters out. We have student bodies all over, and also in this point of still building the college, we're running around trying to raise money all over the place.
That's what I thought you were going to say. Well, I'm really grateful to you for your time, and also just as a subliminal hint, I want you to keep growing the beard. But and if you have any challenges with connectivity or bandwidth, or with raving crowds or distressed passengers at Midway, please, we sympathize. So, well, to begin with, can you tell us a bit about what you do as provost of College UnBound? What are your duties? How many different things do you get to do?
Yeah, I mean, provost at this stage is sort of a catch-all title. When two people start a college, one person's president, one person's provost. So you just kind of figure it out from there. Provost as a term means warden, so warden of the college. In some way, it's protector of the academic vision. And so making sure that the systems we're creating stay true to the intent of what we're trying to build institutionally. What's really hard, and I think, my history before this was I was a jazz historian. And so I care about improvisation. And so trying to figure out how do you institutionalize the ethics of improvisation is at the core of, I think, what makes College UnBound so special.
You have an improv approach to being a provost.
Yeah, exactly.
Excellent. That's terrific. And you're one of the founders of College UnBound. Can you tell us the story about how that happened?
Yeah. So, when we started College UnBound in 2009, we started it for first generation, low income, but traditional college age students. And at that point, the data point that was kind of floating around everywhere is that there was an 11% graduation rate for that kind of student body. I came to the work from, I was still a graduate student at the time, finished up my doctorate in American Studies and Ethnicity at USC out in California. My colleague is a high school innovator that had started a whole network of alternative high schools called Big Picture Learning all around the country and all around the world. And so we were approaching it from two different points of frustration. I was starting to struggle with what did it mean to be a faculty member and think about institution building, as well as what it means to have relationships with students who wanted to continue far, far beyond the semester. And he had a long history of getting students into college because that, in a lot of ways, that's what a high school was measured by at that time. You're a successful high school if you're getting students in, without that notion of what are you getting them into. And so each had these kind of deep core frustrations. And so when we opened our doors in 2009, it was for a traditional college age population, but with kind of the mandate to do something radically different and to in some way flip that retention rate and think about how can we have an 89% graduation rate. Now, we brought students from all around the country in that first year. In fact, the first month of College UnBound, we flew all our first dozen students to Los Angeles. They've all piled into a school bus that I drove. I have a bus driver's license. We went to every student's home. Yeah, I know. We went to every student's hometown where their first college assignment was to design a 2-day oral history walking tour of their city through a lens that they care about and that they're invested in, with the idea that we were going to arrive in Providence, knowing who we are, where we come from, what we care about, and then collectively build a college. And in some way that was beautiful and romantic, and I still celebrate that as an idea so much. And also, 18-year-olds still wanted a college. They still wanted a campus. They still wanted to play Frisbee on the quad, even if in their heart they were still talking about an alternative vision for what that college could be and could help them do. And so we were always struggling in building a living and learning community in Providence that was for students who weren't from Providence. Throughout that first year, adults started seeking us out, saying, I'm not getting what I need out of my public institutions of the state. And what you're doing, building a college through, at that point, internship experiences, kind of deep place-based work and small cohorts, is really what I could use to navigate higher education. And so by the end of our second year, kind of the shift in the college happened through, really, it was like a Facebook post. It wasn't even like an ad or anything. It was just putting it out there, who started college and not finished, and who wants to come together and find out more. And 2 days later, 78 people showed up. And we had kind of this amazing town hall revival of people sharing stories of their experiences in higher ed and why they were struggling to navigate it, but also why they didn't want to go back to traditional higher ed. And so our third year was really an about face, following that student demand and listening to those stories and thinking how collectively we could build a new college for adults who started but not finished their degree and need a very different kind of environment, but also different kind of curriculum that would be an empowering and liberatory one. And so that College UnBound kind of grew out of that moment.
Fantastic. That was 2009, 2010?
Yeah, we opened our doors in 2009, and that was spring of 2011. So in fall of 2011 is really when we had our first full-time adult learner cohort. And that's been the model that we've kind of been working on for these past years.
Well, let me take a step back, and friends, again, this is a wild project. I'm sure you're going to have a lot of observations and questions, and please don't be shy. We'd love to hear from all of them, and I'll try and imagine some of your questions and ventriloquize them if possible. In fact, we already have a comment in the chat box. I suspect you're on the mobile app, so you can't see this, which is Tom Haynes saying simply, "College should be a community." How many of your well, first of all, how many students are at College UnBound right now?
Yeah, we have about 200 students right now, about half of whom are currently incarcerated. And so we're really trying to find how do you create a college for folks who are underserved
Wow,
from the institutions as they presently exist. So we're the
half of
only
them are
upper
currently
division.
incarcerated.
Yeah, we're the only upper division credits being
Oh.
offered within the correctional or incarceration facilities of Rhode Island. But really designing that program, really thinking about restorative justice and reentry. So it's not just to offer a bachelor's degree to offer a bachelor's degree, but how it connects to navigating those systems. And then the rest of our students are either full or part-time students, either in mixed cohorts where they come with very different projects and ideas of what they want to drive their curriculum, or our cohorts embedded into place or workplace. So then we also have a group of 10 adult employees at the United Way of Rhode Island, who on Tuesday afternoons go into their conference room, and there's a faculty member there, there's childcare there, there's dinner there, and they're all doing projects that actually help the United Way build capacity. And so it's a different kind of investment in a college program there in that workplace. So we're trying to think about how to see college as something that can be embedded into place or helps folks recognize the teaching and learning that's in those relationships they're already a part of.
Embedded into some other place beyond the campus.
Yeah, exactly. The point is not to build a College UnBound that has a main campus. It's really to build a College UnBound infrastructure that can allow credit bearing practices to happen where learning takes place. And so that could be in the workplace, that could be in the community, that could be in churches, that could be, we do a lot of our work in high schools after high school students leave, they become adult learner campuses. We think about public libraries. So we're trying to recognize learning where it happens and find ways to build around that, to bring faculty into those spaces, to empower students to do projects that grow out of that learning, and to then officially credential and accredit it.
That's tremendous. What an unusual and what a liberating idea for a college. Let me just drill down to some more of the practical details because I'm sure people's heads are spinning and they're trying to think of ways to grapple with this. One is to how many, roughly, what proportion of your students engage with classes face to face, and how many are online?
Yeah, so the logistics of our program is we want students, if they can, to be full-time students in our program, but not to be sitting in classrooms for like 5 classes a semester.
Right?
The one in-person requirement we do have is that you're a part of a cohort that meets in a 3-hour, once-a-week seminar. And that seminar includes childcare and dinner. So we're trying to recognize the things that would stop someone from being active, present learners in those spaces.
How big is a cohort?
Cohort's about 15 students. It's not a hard 15, so there's some that are 12, there's some that are a little bit more. But really thinking about a cohort with an advisor, and that group stays together throughout their degree process. So it's not a student services advisor, it's actually a faculty member, a generalist who helps drive the student projects that are both individual and then grow into collective work. So our full-time students are really involved in one another's work, not as a college assignment, but because they're building deep reciprocal relationships through that cohort environment. Students also have to have a one-on-one meeting weekly with their advising faculty member. That's really about crafting a personal learning plan. What questions are you involved and invested in that week? What work you're doing that's a part of your classes, but also that you're bringing to your project that will help move it forward. What are your tasks and deliverables, and what's a reflection that we can talk through together? And then courses that are taught by instructional faculty are really there to provide a lens to help students move their projects. And that's both collective, a whole cohort may take us the same class together, or students might be involved in independent studies. That could happen whether on ground or online.
That's really really amazing. This is not the typical. It's not typical college almost any way. I love that you have childcare and food. That's fantastic. Um, Let me add another basic question. Again,
Yeah.
friends, I want to make sure that we're all, I don't want to leave anybody out. I want to make sure that we're on the same page and understand all the different pieces that are moving this great project. Well, you mentioned pedagogical innovations. You mentioned some project-based learning. What are some of these pedagogies that you're deploying, and how did you suit them to your particular mission?
Yeah, I mean, in some way, it's that the relationship drives the curriculum, and that the project drives the curriculum. I, I don't
Wow.
I don't really care what the project is in some way. I care that the student has ownership over their learning. And one of the best things that one of our graduates said was that once he found his project, he stopped going to college. It wasn't that he stopped being a college student, but that he stopped doing
Right.
it for the sake of the the
Got
specific
it.
degree requirements. He had this thing that was driving him, and how great that college was the excuse to have the resources to be able to understand and do it and unpack it and put it into action. So we really care about the engagement and application of learning. Um, and so that's where the cohort becomes so critical. That's where the relationship with the advisor becomes so critical.
Mm.
That idea of the project starts, during the first admissions interview. It's what do you care about? What are you invested in? What drives you? And how can you start to see college as the excuse to put that into practice?
College is an excuse to do that. Wow.
Yeah,
So when you
yeah,
use an infrastructure, you really mean it. Yeah.
and for adult learners, that's so critical because they're so pressed for time too. Because there's always going to be things that are pulling you in 12 different directions. So you need college to be the thing that you're thankful for, not just for the learning for learning's sake, and I believe deeply in that, but it's really how it helps you navigate the world around you better, how it helps you improve your material lived conditions in front of you, that you can
Mm.
see it as it's happening. So that when someone's graduating, they're not just graduating with a transcript, they're graduating with a different resume too. We see we see a faculty team surrounding every student. So it might be that I'm a part of every student's faculty because I'm their advisor. They also then have professional mentors that are, whether it's their boss in their workplace or someone else that's helping them put their project into action. They have
Mm.
peers
Mm.
that aren't just accountability partners but are deeply invested in their work. And they have other field experts that they might bring in real time. We think about classes as accelerated adult learner classes. So they're 3 credit courses, but really built around 9 week sessions, so that it's happening in response to a student that you might not know a grant can be due in December when you're registering for classes in September. So I want as much flexibility around that as I can, so that we have 9 week classes that start in late August as well as in mid October, so that you're
Wow.
taking it to respond to your project as it's growing and changing.
And as a student comes to you.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
Wow.
and we care deeply about prior learning assessment. Um, and so every student goes through a course to understand the process of documenting learning that happened pre-college unbound, but also how to package learning that's happening while in college unbound, but not might be tied specifically to course deliverables. So
Mhm.
we have
Mhm.
a we have what we've worked with Kale to design a standard interview protocol for students to defend learning of what we call leadership in action. And so students, as they're putting their project into practice, are also understanding theories of applied leadership in different ways. So then how does that translate to a course that they can also defend for credit to an outside organization like Kale that then transfers back into us? So we're trying to find those pressure points, trying to find the tools that students can be in control of their, not just their learning but also their time to degree, then that they can think about prior learning as a thing that can help them advance in that way. And then the one other piece I haven't mentioned is what we've abbreviated as the Big Ten, the things that in some way employers or anyone who running a college would say they really care about more than content. It's the creativity, collaboration, problem solving, integrated and applied learning, resilience. I'm going to run out of, but there's 10 of them. Um, how do we actually take those things seriously? Not as a byproduct of learning, but as real credit bearing pieces towards a degree. Not just as learning outcomes of individual classes, but it's things that we want students to take ownership of and have the tools to be able to measure. So we have rubrics for each of the Big Ten, and we ask students to create portfolios of each of them that have then credit assigned to them that get assessed by faculty committees, much like a student would submit a portfolio of learning to be assessed.
Mm. Mm. I like what you said before about having to defend this to the outside world. We have a couple of text questions that have come in from people who can't come on video. So let's just flash one of those up on the screen, Tara, if we could. Whichever one comes first. I think that's from Mark Anderson. There is a once per week FTF requirement, but is the rest fully online? Is the advisory meeting handled to FTF online or face-to-face only? Good question, Mark.
Yeah. Do you want me to answer each one, or
That's
do you
right.
throw a bunch at me? Cool. So
take them.
I would say the face-to-face cohort is certainly required to be in person. It's that 3-hour integrated seminar that the advising faculty is designing. The advisor meeting, when I was working as an advisor, I really preferred it to be face-to-face, but it also has to be flexible in a way where student lives get in the way, and so you might have a Zoom meeting one time, or you're really running like crazy, and so you work out a deal with that student where it's really 30 text messages back and forth over the course of a half hour. The rest of the credit bearing work throughout the session, it's up to the student and the advising faculty to design that course of study. And so there could be in-person independent studies, there could be online independent studies, there could be in-person cohort, like full cohort courses. There also could be online courses. We use a mix of Digication as our portfolio system, as well as Motivus Learning to sort of house our competencies and our course-based interaction there. And so we move back and forth between them to make sure that there are systems that fit the needs of how students and faculty are interacting. Regardless, we keep to the instructional time and the engaged academic time requirements of a 3-credit class. We just want to make sure it fits the student needs and the project needs as they're moving through these credit-bearing practices.
So time based on the credit is the ultimate horizon for that, and how you fill that is based on what technology suits people the best.
Yeah, exactly.
That's great preparation for life.
We talk about being competency influenced, but still course based. So students are moving through towards 120 credits, but we really want to think about competencies, both those Big 10 that I mentioned, as well as all the competencies that influence the learning outcomes of our courses. But we do want to have that kind of interaction with faculty and the instructional time that would drive that, because the relationships are so core to this.
This is fascinating. And Mark, thank you for a great question. Really just illuminated this clearly. We have another question from Val Bach. Let's see if we can put that on the screen too. Val asks, everything you described sounds like a holy grail of student involvement. But how do you address the challenge of credentialing? Good question.
Yeah, so I think I'll answer that through the lens of accreditation, which I think is part of what you're getting at. So we're in the thick of NEASC accreditation right now. We had our candidacy visit in the spring. We submitted our self-study. We are at the level of what's called eligible to apply for candidacy, and we've submitted that application. And then NEASC will be voting on our candidacy this fall, which would then potentially allow students that attend our school to start to be able to access Title IV if we move to that next stage of federal eligibility. And then we're in a candidacy period for around 5 years. What that more or less depends on how we navigate NEASC and how NEASC gives feedback to our program. It's certainly been a rigorous and really important process for us to work with and understand our peer institutions. It's challenged the structures that we've created these years ago, ensured that we're creating the policies that hold us true to our mission, but also hold true to things like instructional time that I mentioned, that then reinforce the ways that we want to teach. It's made us a much better college and much more aware of what we need to do to provide verification of learning, to ensure that students are graduating with what we care about as a College UnBound degree, and what our peer institutional partners care about as a regionally accredited degree?
Well, thank you for that answer. Val, that's a key question. And just personally, let me wish you luck at this fall.
Thanks.
Let us know how that turns out. For friends who are just joining us, and there's some people who have come in, hello to Mary Crawford, Nick Hare, Karen Pelliner. Hello, Kathleen Fitzpatrick. Great to see you. If you haven't had a chance to poke around the technology, let me just remind you that there are 3 channels for asking questions. So if you look down the bottom of the screen along that white strip, there's 3 buttons on the left edge. 1 for text chat, 1 for a text question, and 1 for video. So poke those, and please don't be shy with your questions. As you can see, we've had some great ones. Tara, see if you can bring Tom on the stage. Oh, go ahead, Evan.
One thing, so just, I believe I might have 1 student or 2 in the audience. I know students got to leave at 2:45, so I just want to be aware of time. So Chris Suckman, if you're there and if there's a way to flag him and perhaps send a question his way, or Brian, if you want to ask him or bring him up to the podium.
Chris. Chris, if your broadband is working, if your camera is there, looks like here you come.
It's great to be here. I really believe in College UnBound, and I like advocating for the design and the program whenever I can.
What do you especially like about the design of the program?
Briefly, flexibility is really key for me.
We'll lose him.
May have had a connection problem. Let's see if we can bring him back.
All right, we'll give him 1 more shot.
Maybe it takes bringing the puppy to make it work.
I'm back.
Yes, you are. Yes, we can see and hear you.
My subtitle says camera not active.
We hear you. We're good. We hear you and see you.
Well, flexibility is really important for everyone. It works well. It dovetails really nice with whatever our job and lifestyle are. There's single parents. There's people with really intense jobs. I, of course, am one of the younger students at College UnBound.
Of course.
So I've got a lot of family duties and a pretty intense job. The other thing I like about it is it's really interactive. I saw one of the people commented on college as a community. Even though we're a cohort that only meets once a week, we interact with the general community in a lot of different ways, and we interact with each other. So the learning is drawn from so many different. Learning is coming from all different directions. You're bombarded with learning. We have collaborations with Brown University, with Providence College. It's just so interconnected in so many ways. It gives you a really diverse education, which is transformational, actually. And then the other thing is, since it's project based, all learning is connected to what I want to do, my passion. So everything's meaningful, and it keeps me motivated the whole time. Like my particular project, as I told you, is unleashing the creative potential of neurodiversity. You know, artists who are neurodiverse, whether they're on the autism spectrum or have a cognitive disability, have a lot of creative potential. And in order for the world to see that, we got to do that in a way that makes it fun and gets people to creates proximity between people who wouldn't normally be exposed to people who are neurodiverse. And I'm passionate about that. I have a son with Down syndrome who's awesome, and this is my way of getting my family involved into my education and also doing something for the community.
That's incredible. Thank you. I really, really appreciate your voice there. What a great project too. My God.
Yes. Pretty cool.
Please go ahead, Evan. Please.
Well, I was just to add to. I mean, Chris, I think you're doing incredible work, and what I've appreciated so much is how open you've been to how your project's evolved. It's always had what you've said at the core, and then what that looks like on a semester to semester basis has changed as you've encountered new classes, as you've worked with new professors, as you yourself have grown and changed, as you've connected to the institution in different ways. And so one of the things that I just want to point out is that Chris is now talking about how do we create higher education opportunities, really taking neurodiversity into account. But it was about creative potential connected to neurodiversity before. And so that evolution of your project, I think, is natural and organic, and that's the kind of institution we want to build. that where we have one overarching major called organizational leadership and change. In some way, we care about the major. I care deeply about what the learning outcomes are of that major, but it's designed as an umbrella major that has the flexibility for a student's project to evolve, and to allow them to move between social change, social justice organizing, organizational theory work, understands their own leadership and personal growth and development, so that you're tied to really the idea of yourself and your work driving your curriculum, not the degree requirements driving it. At least that's how it should feel for the student, whether or not the back end certainly has that as its rigor that informs the backbone.
Chris, do you want to respond to that?
I think that there's like a symbiotic relationship between the college and our projects. You know, it's really cool, and it is. They're evolving and we're evolving, and I think they're so grateful for College UnBound and how it allows us to do what we want and moves us forward. And we see growth in our personal life. We see growth in our work, in our careers. We see growth in our family is personal, and we see growth in our project. So being that it does more than just educates us, we're grateful, and so we're devoted to College UnBound. And I think College UnBound realizes that, and it's more than just going to lectures and having people who care how we perform. It's more like it's much more personalized that way. And so, Adam's right. My project now is sort of veered in a different direction, and it's supported. And now I'm looking at universal design for learning, because not only do I want to help the creative process, I need to learn how to communicate better. Communication is one of the big 10 practices. So to become more skilled in communication, I need to learn how to communicate with everybody, not just people in the world of education. Now, I could have a much more intelligent conversation with this audience here today, because I've learned a little bit of educationalese, and I listened to the whole accreditation, the process where you're talking to NEASC and what they're looking for. But I can also have a conversation out in the community with people who I want to understand what's happening at College UnBound, because I want College UnBound to grow as well.
Nice. Wow. That's so great to hear you say this. Let me ask you both a quick question. You mentioned that the overarching major for everyone is organizational change. Is that the case, that all 200 students have the same major?
Yeah, organizational leadership and change is the
leadership change.
Yeah. There's different, in a sense. There's not tracks within it. There's core requirements. There's a core first semester with classes called Introduction to Organizational Leadership and Change, Contextualizing Work, Writing for Change, and Reframing Failure, that contain the sort of backbone of project development, of organizational theory, of the underpinnings of what we see as successful project development. And then at the core of every student's semester, so we call the Workplace and World Lab. Now, most students are only taking a lab when they're taking science in higher education. We really see the lab, the engagement and application needing to happen all the time. And it's not just a capstone culmination. And so every semester, Chris is one of the founding students, is in my cohort. And so there's a group of 15 colleagues and Chris and myself that meet weekly as a part of the Workplace and World Lab. That we talk about how it needs to change each semester to evolve and support student projects. And we talk about how the courses that they're taking need to be seen through the lens of their project. And so that personal learning plan I described is a core piece of the Workplace World Lab. Every semester, students are doing public exhibitions of their work to their peers, as well as that larger faculty team that I mentioned, of the professional mentors, the other field experts. And so we see that lab as driving each semester of project growth, and we have course requirements that are tied to the major and the focus.
Wow, that's an unusual way of structuring an undergrad experience. I have more questions, but we have another questioner who wants to come up. So let's see if we can bring Tom Hames up, and we can have all four of us on the stage at the same time. Tom is a longtime forum participant and contributor. We're very grateful to him for his support, for his great questions. And Tom, Where are you coming from today?
Oh, lovely Katy, Texas, just outside of Houston.
Wow. Well,
Uh,
you look
I
very
had,
blue.
yeah, well, that's the room. Kind of blue. We'll start the Miles Davis up in a minute. Just some logistical questions. So first of all, how do you scope these projects so that they are achievable? I mean, obviously, ending world hunger in 4 years is probably a little beyond the scope of what most people can realistically accomplish. I mean, as someone who likes to do a lot of project-based work in this class, it's always a real challenge. How far can you push it to where people are challenged, but it's not impossible. And of course, the problem with most students I've discovered is they do tend to dream big in many cases, but then they lose that connection to how do I make those steps. I want to save the world versus, okay, well, I need to save the city hall first, or whatever path you choose to take in that regard. So that's one question. I mean, how do you figure that out? And then the second part of that question is do you teach traditional, what we might call liberal arts courses, and do those relate back? Do you try to relate an English class or a government or a history class back into what those people are, what those projects are intending to achieve? So
Yeah. So I'll do a quick down and dirty answer, and then Chris, if you want to add to the story, okay? So it's a Bachelor of Arts, and so we have liberal arts requirements for sure. I would say it. When you talked about are they taught traditionally, they're taught differently, but we certainly have courses in our academic catalog that that align with traditional, like a history class. Chris right now is in a history of higher education course that he just finished, and that's fulfilling his history requirement. We're a degree completion school, so students can bring in anywhere from 9 to 90 credits. We're not starting with students who have 0. So we have to have we have general education underpinnings for sure that are requirements before graduation, but we have to have a flexible program that allows a cohort to have different requirements met over time. When they're sort of starting, they might be coming in with different things. So you can't just move them through with everyone taking the same class all the time. The project and the size of it, in some way, I don't care if someone has a 2-week project, a 2-month project, or a 2 lifetimes project. But they have public exhibitions that they're doing on a regular basis. They're meeting with their advisor weekly, who's really asking what are your goals for this week and how you're moving it forward. The thing that I care about is that a student doesn't invent a project for the sake of a class, but the class is there to serve the project. So there's not an arbitrary endpoint of my project's got to be done December 13th because Adam's got to turn in grades on the 15th. Your project is whatever it is in real life. There's check-in points along the way, and that makes sure there's true accountability and there's development of the project. But it also allows for the projects to grow and change over time. That after doing something for 2 semesters, someone may say, "Oh, here are the things I've learned, and it's evolving into this way." And instead of that meaning I've got to declare a new major, in some way, while I said organizational leadership and change, the romantic way to say it is you're majoring in yourself. And you're majoring in your growth and development, your project's growth and development. And as that happens, you're learning new things and you're surrounding yourself with new faculty. That do okay?
no, that's excellent. There's, I guess, your regular classes for sort of a general education. I don't want to, I'm not talking about teaching methodologies or any of that stuff. I mean, because there's 100 different ways you can teach a history class, and I'm certainly not an advocate of the lecture method or anything like that, or the traditional 19th century schooling that we like to do. If that project pivots, do you change courses at that point? How do you get to a point where you have a cohesive whole at the end of the academic travels?
Yeah. So, I mean, I'll do one sentence and then I'll hand it to Chris. So it's like, in my weekly meetings, I'm there to make sure that the work that he's doing and the courses he's taking align with degree requirements and what he's doing towards his bachelor's degree. And so there could be things where he's got to take a science class. Yep. And his project might not simply lend itself to that, but we work out how we're going to design a nutrition class. And it's going to be about thinking about how do you, then for Chris, how do you design a health program that ties to the community-based education he's really trying to impart. So you relate it to the project. It may not always organically grow out of the project as I will romanticize it, but certainly those requirements are there and those courses are there, whether they are independent studies, full cohort, or mixed cohort. This summer, there's going to be students from the United Way program who are taking classes with students who are within Chris's cohort. And it's not necessarily that the whole group is doing that. They all need the same kind of requirements, so they're clumped together. And in that case, we're using our online infrastructure more than we are in person because we're not going to require everyone to travel to be at the same place at the same time. Chris, you want to take this ad?
Briefly, it's really important. It's our job to connect our project to the learning. I mean, that makes sense. We're not here to perform for them. We're here to get out of what we're being offered and make real life connections. I think that's what the project-based model is great for. I just want to give you a quick example of that. The history of higher ed, we all got so much out of that course because one, it was the instructor was someone who's very, is like a rock star in higher ed as far. John Saltmarsh is a rock star in higher ed as far as I'm concerned. And what we did is we were looking at Brown University, is in Providence, Rhode Island, and we were looking at we went way back to the Truman days, the Truman Commission on higher ed, and then we brought it up through. Now the whole way we're posting our reflections on this and the context they're giving us in articles on Digication. So you could go to our portfolios and see how we're processing it. And each time we're asked to connect it to our project all along the way. And we're getting feedback. Oh, yeah, you made a great connection there. So there's this constant back and forth. And it's not just between Adam and myself or our mentor, because we each have a mentor, or it's between the other members of the cohort. We're all going on and looking at each other's portfolio and seeing what everybody's posting. And there's this giant conversation about this. And it's like it explodes with different learning in all directions. So what they did is they set up this night where we actually went to Brown University. Now, they cheated on the walkout in 1968, and I want to try and help me keep this brief, Adam. In 1968, Pembroke College was the sister college to Brown, and it wasn't co-ed at that point. And the black women made some demands, and the black men made some demands because they weren't being represented in the population. So they walked out instead of having a sit-in like the typical protesters, and they got their demands because the administration freaked out. Well, we studied that and all the things around it, and they pulled an article that someone had recently written from UMass. And that night we met her. We met the archivist from Pembroke. We met someone who attended the church, the Baptist church where they walked through on the walkout. We actually did the walk that the students walked, and it was all conducted by women, because it was underrepresentation of women. We learned about the intersection of blacks and women and how they're underrepresented. And that whole evening was the most amazing experience. And it brought the learning to life. And everybody was like truly moved in that. And you can't do something like that. I mean, I guess you could at a traditional college, but the whole thought that went into this event and how they connected it was good for everybody in the cohort. And it connected to all their, I wish you could read everybody's response on just that one evening. It would give you a real indication. I posted my email. If anybody has specific questions, because I know we don't have much time, please feel free to ask me anything. The more specific, the better. I'd be glad to respond.
That's great. Thank you so much for that answer and for that offer.
Yeah, that was awesome, Chris. And I think just you could see the history of higher education is clearly also the history of neoliberalism. And doing that research class was also archival practices. What does it mean to be a historian? And so those two pieces affect anyone's project. It's not now just write a paper for your professor about X. It's how do you understand how to be a historian differently through this, and how then do you apply that lens to your project?
Nice. What a great project. We have another question coming up, and we're running out of time. So, Tom, let me thank you very much for your question. It's always good to see you here. And we have another question from Mike Welker from North Central.
And let me just say, Chris, I know that you wanted to go at 2:45. If you got to duck out, don't feel like you got to stick around, but I really appreciate you being here.
Thanks, I'm glad to be here. Rock on.
Chris, we really all appreciate it. Thank you so much. And good luck with your project.
Thank you.
Mike, can you see and hear us okay?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. That was great stuff. My question is kind of getting the idea of like it's the Alverno college model. Is that fair in the sense of it isn't a straight predetermined course? There's just the eventual competencies, or is that not fair or accurate?
I mean, I think certainly that's fair. I think we are still figuring out our pieces. So Alverno is absolutely a peer institution. We've learned lots from them. Part of, as College UnBound has grown, we've spearheaded with a group of a few other colleges, Alverno included, what we've now called Great Colleges for the New Majority. So schools that are working in relationship-based practices for new traditional students. Sorry, you lost me for a second. For new traditional students that are
we can still hear you, though. Adam, can you speak? Okay, we may have lost Adam. We'll try and bring him back. We're all doing this on thin connections. It was a great point he mentioned, the colleges for the new majority, adult learners came back. Adam.
So great colleges for the new majority as this group between Evergreen State College, DePaul University School for New Learning, Alverno, College UnBound, National Louis, Johnson C. Smith. So schools that are doing relationship-based practices, working with new traditional students, so adult learners who are returning to school. And so we're really trying to draw on best practices that we've all kind of been playing around with for so many years, certainly far longer than College UnBound. The language I use about competency influenced, I think, is important, where we really do tie it to, at this point, 120 credits and sort of course-based units as students are bringing in. But we want to make sure that those sort of course-based 3-credit units correspond to learning that they need in real time and are flexible enough to be different kinds of learning environments and are connected to the learning environments students are already a part of.
It's really interesting. And what, I'm sorry, what was the name for that again? The consortium?
Great Colleges for the New Majority. And I will, I'll send out, we haven't yet built a website, but we do have a mission statement I will circulate and a letter that we want people to sign on and endorse. So I will do that. And we're trying to grow the network. We're actually holding a summer institute in Chicago, co-hosted by DePaul and National Louis this summer. So if anyone's in the area or wants to come out for it, we're still trying to build it and trying to figure out what a network should be for like-minded colleges, how we can support one another, how we can create things like a College 101 for adults who are trying to go back to school, but also professional development opportunities for faculty who may be looking specifically to work with this student population, maybe as part-time faculty moving between institutions, and how we can create a consortium that would help faculty certainly have job security and also be able to feel a part of something beyond the conditions that part-time labor may be pushing them to sort of feel separate from the institution.
Definitely.
That's awesome.
If you could intervene just for a quick second, Adam, when you have that website up, I would love to be able to share it.
Absolutely.
And I'll follow up with the event. Mike, what a great question. Thank you for asking that.
Yeah.
Thanks for the opportunity. Thanks.
No, our pleasure. Our pleasure. Adam, we're just about at the end of the hour. We've raced through here. We've ruthlessly interrogated your student. We've been interrogating you up against the wall in the airport. What are you looking ahead, say 5 or 10 years out? I'm really struck by that resonant phrase, college for the new majority. Is this a major path forward for the rest of higher ed? Do you think traditional campuses, community colleges, state schools, liberal arts colleges, research universities, do you think they can follow the path that you're blazing?
I mean, so it's a really good question. I mean, I think the adult learner, and certainly the returning adult learner, is a student body that has to be taken seriously and deeply, and we need them invested in the creation of the next 100 years of higher education. Returning students themselves come with deep systems level critiques of the institutions they were a part. We need to hear those critiques. We need to create different kinds of systems. They also come with deep trauma. It's why College UnBound needs to look and feel very different because of traumatic experiences that these students have had previously in higher education. I don't lightly use that term, but they certainly do come feeling unheard and unseen from past experiences in higher education.
Oh, you mean trauma-based in education, not from external forces?
Yeah.
Sorry, Mr. Richard.
Right, yeah. Yeah, no, I think deep trauma of higher education, actually. Of higher education, that we need to really rethink our systems that we're building. And then the kind of organizational infrastructure you hinted at when you talked about colleges are closing, and certainly there was news this morning about that. I want a school that grows organically out of the communities of which it's a part. So that means that it's got to grow in spaces like the United Way that I talked about, and like high schools for and like public libraries. But it also means it needs to organically shrink when it needs to, and that shrinking isn't seen as a failure or a loss. So I think that could be awesome if a 15-person group starts out of a cultural arts center in New Orleans, and then as those students graduate who may be affiliated employees and allies connected to the Ashe Cultural Arts Center, as they graduate, then perhaps it's not starting a campus there, but it may be that it then isn't a campus. It isn't a cohort. You graduate them. That's great. Then maybe it needs to happen 5 more years later in that space, or maybe it happens somewhere else. And so it's growing and shrinking as it needs to. It's using college, like I said, as an excuse. So that, in Providence, there's an organization called the Institute for the Study and Practice of Nonviolence, where folks who are doing direct action violence intervention have been part of our college student body this past decade. Now, what could it mean for college to be the excuse to connect that organization with other cohorts in other similar institutions around the country? Then that's not college for the sake of a major and a degree, but movement building, that you're connecting organizations, right? And even like Kellogg doing its Truth, Racial Healing, and Transformation initiative right now, or the organizations that Ford or Kresge have funded all around this country. How could then a college pathway be an add-on to those organizational connections, so that the degree becomes the thing that helps sustain those relationships in different ways? That's what we want to try and have College UnBound become.
What a vision. What a fantastic vision. Speaking of vision, we have time for one more question. I'm sorry, we've got some questions that are starting to pile up. Tara, why don't you flash up one of the text questions that we've got? And this is from, let's see, who do we have? This is from Sharon Argov. Are the incarcerated taught virtually, on ground, or in a hybrid format? And geographically, where are they? Great question, Sharon.
Yeah. So in Rhode Island right now, in its incarcerated campus, there's 4 facilities: minimum, medium, maximum, and a women's facility. They don't have any internet access, and so we're doing all that work with faculty going inside. As students get out, they're entering into what we call the Reentry Gateway program, that is really about navigating reentry services and student human services. So they're doing that as a cohort. And what we've done on the inside is we've created a 15-credit 1-year sort of project development program that ideally is a capstone on top of a 60-credit associates that they would be taking from the community college. So we have students who take our program before they finish their associates. We have students that have additional upper division credits they've brought in already before they're incarcerated. So we're trying to create certainly an infrastructure, but one that needs to be flexible as students get out before finishing that program, and as students need to continue moving on to their bachelor's degree if they're still incarcerated after it.
A great answer. And Sharon, what a great question. Thank you so much. Friends, we are out of time. I hate to say it. Adam, I think we could talk to you for days. And I'd love to have you come back to let us know how things progress. I'd like to follow.
Always. Yeah.
Oh, thank you.
I've been a long time admirer of your work, Brian, and of this network. And as we keep navigating accreditation, I'd love to come back and give you some progress updates and find ways to plug in together.
I'd really like that, and maybe we can visit on site.
Yeah, please do. That'd be great. Please come to Providence, check us out, hang out with our students, see us in action.
And the best way to find you is College UnBound on the web.
Adam at collegeunbound.org or provost at collegeunbound.org will both get to me.
Okay, everyone got that? We can all get to it. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And have a good flight.
Thanks for making time.
Pleasure. Friends, let me just quickly offer a few remarks about where we're going next. Let me thank you all for coming and for asking such penetrating questions. What a fantastic school. Next week, we shift ground to the awesome Jennifer Sparrow. Jennifer has been doing great work on digital literacy and media literacy. So we're going to get a chance to sit down with her and explore what digital literacy and media literacy means in the age of fake news and new technologies. So please be ready for questions for that. Also, we haven't picked our next book out yet, but we are always eager for suggestions. So we'd love to hear what you think we should read for the book club. And on top of that, just going forward, we're starting to think about where the forum goes, where phase 2 of the Future Trends Forum is. And we've been going for almost 2.5 years. So I'll start reaching out to some of you, and we may have a session just talking about that. But I would love to hear your thoughts. You can find me, as you can see from the slide here, on Twitter, Brian Alexander. You can always email me, brian.alexander@gmail.com. I'm going to follow up by talking about this through social media, so if you want to talk publicly or privately, I may just poll you as well. But any of your thoughts, any of your brainstorms, blue sky ideas, criticisms, dreams, we'd love to hear them. I'm really grateful to all of you for your questions. This is a fabulous, fabulous community of people, and I'm honored to be part of it. So until next time, think hard about all this, keep dreaming, and we'll see you next week. Bye-bye.